Hey everybody. Today, Mike and I are going to be talking to Kim Delfina Gleason. She's the Executive Director of Two Worlds, a native theater and performing arts organization in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Kim, thank you so much for joining us today, and we're really excited to talk to you and learn about the type of theater that you do and your company and about you personally. So let's just jump in, and if you don't mind, just maybe give us a little background about the company, about how you got involved in the company, and the how and why of its foundation.
Thank you for inviting me onto your show. I'm really excited to spread the word of Native theater in general the nation. My name is Kim Delfina Gleason, originally from the Navajo Nation. My family respectively comes from Saru and Crown Point, New Mexico on my mother's side, and on my father's side, Window Rock and Port Defiance, Arizona area. So I am the executive director of Two Worlds. It's a native theater performing arts organization in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And my role with Two Worlds started long ago in 2006, which is the first year that Two Worlds was founded by a couple of founders here in Albuquerque, New Mexico, one of them being James Lujan from Taos Pueblo, and the organization of VSA Arts of New Mexico. So I give my accreditation to them for starting this program, which originally started in 2006. There I was able to start out as an actress with them. I recently had graduated in 2005 from the University of New Mexico Theater and Dance Department. And training there, I was able to find Two Worlds kind of land on my lap the next year. Took on several roles that were being taken upon the organization of Two Worlds at the moment. Under their direction, they were making sure that they were producing native theater and performing arts for and by our people. So for those first few years, they continued their work with developing short films with local native theater and filmmakers here in New Mexico. And in 2009 was when we started to kind of change shifts in roles and responsibilities, and that's when they asked me to become the artistic director of Two Worlds. So since 2009, which was long ago, it seems, is the first steps that I took as a leadership role into the Native American theatrical art.
What was the initial response you had when you started within the group?
I was really, I kind of just had my eyes wide open. I was like, who, me? Take over this whole thing? Are you sure? I was very honored. I think because I was coming out of a program already integrated for the arts in Albuquerque. At the time, there weren't enough native theater and native theater writers in 2005. There were a good handful of them that were developing these really great scripts for Native American actors, but there weren't enough Native actors at the time that were trained in theatrical arts. So I was honored in this position to take over, and my initial response was, okay, I've never taken on a leadership role before. I've always kind of been the actor to be told, this is what we're doing, and learn your lines and go on stage, and this is what you do. But it meant so much more to me to take on this leadership position because a lot of our community in Albuquerque needed a place to call home, or a place to develop their theatrical arts. And without Two Worlds being around, there was a lack of representation when it comes to storytelling in the theatrical element. So I wanted to make sure that continued. They did present that there was a problem where there was no other person really in this role right now in this moment to take over a leadership position for Two Worlds. So that's why they were hoping, they were praying, I think, for me to just say yes. And,
no pressure, right?
No pressure at all. But it did solidify myself at that moment that this is meant to be, and this is the journey that I have to take.
Mhm.
Wonderful.
So artistic director in 2009, and you made the jump to executive director in which year?
I think as soon as we started to shift the plate back in 2011 and going into 2014, within those 4 years, we started to really define ourselves as the direction that this company needs to go. Instead of from being just a local community of actors and artists coming together to perform a show, we needed to take it to the limit. We needed to put ourselves on a platform of professionalism along with other theatrical organizations here in town. And we knew that there was only one way that we could be taken seriously is by moving forward and developing a 501c. So I believe during that time, people just started referring to me as executive director because I was making sure that I was the backbone of the company, taking care of all the documentation, the casting, the directing, the development of the ensemble that we were trying to form.
Oh, okay. So it was just a natural progression from artistic director into now somebody who has to run a business because that's the direction that you're moving in.
Exactly. And at the beginning, I was doing a lot of the directing and acting, but slowly over the years, I've completely taken myself out just because it's a lot of time and consideration when we go into shows that I wanted to make sure they gave opportunities to other upcoming Native actors and directors and writers who needed a place to call home. So I made sure that I was just coming back to my, I was very comfortable being behind the desk again and just doing the framework and the body of who we are now.
So once you made that jump over to executive director and you took on more of a leadership role and less of an artistic role, what would you say are some of your proudest accomplishments under your leadership?
I feel that accomplishing the 501c was quite a bit of work. On my part, I developed a Native American or a Native board that also represented the artistic and performing arts community in some fashion. We all sat together and made Two Worlds bylaws and articles of incorporation, and we really had to take care and consideration when we came to that, because as Native artists, we don't want to stereotype ourselves. That's the first thing that we wanted to accomplish with Two Worlds, is understanding who we were. We happened to be Native artists that wanted to not only just stay within our realm of producing our own work for and by our people, but we also wanted to take chances on producing work that was outside of our circle as well, because we wanted to let people know that even though we are Native American, we can still continue to do work like Shakespeare and classical works, and we were ready for that challenge. So that's why we wanted to make sure that we took some care on writing of the bylaws and articles. That's one of my
no, continue, sorry.
That's one of my first accomplishments just recently that I was very proud to accomplish. And I think that slowly and surely the Albuquerque theater community made sure to understand that, wow, Two Worlds has been here for a while. Maybe they need a place to really, I believe the Albuquerque theater community were very into our own shows and our own work. So they made sure to include Two Worlds in the new generation of theater here in town. And what that included was me becoming eventually on the board of directors for the Albuquerque theater community, and then eventually taking on the chair and president of the organization, which I am now. So I'm the first Native theater or person to ever be representing the Albuquerque theater organization as a whole. So that was the second accomplishment, I think, in the most recent years. And just being involved initially with my circle of Native organizations that I represent. It's been an honor to always be titled Executive Director of Two Worlds, because we are the only Native theater organization here in Albuquerque. Mm-hmm. And the work that we're doing is really important. We want to make sure that we're doing it in a time where we're not only taking space for the artists that are coming in who are making a place that was never represented before. I can go back to going back to high school and college, because I knew theater was going to be in my future somehow, in some way. I didn't have anyone to look up to at the time. I didn't have anyone that was doing what I'm doing now. So it was really important for me to take a place for others, for the next generation of artists that are coming up, and I'm very proud of that.
As you should be. I commend you for that. That must be a heavy responsibility, but you seem to be doing it well from what you've said.
I hope so.
Is there that kind of leads me to my question? Is there ever a struggle within to represent an individual voice versus the collective voice of what you're doing? From your point of view, because I'm sure there must be because you touch upon also doing Shakespeare and doing other things, but at the same time, this responsibility. Is there ever a kind of, I know for myself, it's an inner struggle. Is there some of that? Do you ever feel at times, or no?
Oh, yes. We're always battling, challenging ourselves in terms of what the work that we're accomplishing is always redefining ourselves in a world where a Western concept was always doing our work for us with non-Native actors. So we have a long history of that happening with our practitioners and our cultural leaders. And so I do always take into consideration of the plays, if they're actual Native and Indigenous plays, I take into consideration of who is the writer and what they need to accomplish their voice and their story through having someone who can represent that tribal affiliation. Because there are oftentimes that we have to do shows that are not always Navajo, and I have more experience with Navajo plays, of course, because I am Navajo. But there's oftentimes where we have challenges where we have a Pueblo representative play, or we have to represent a play that's non-Navajo. So we always make sure that we take in consideration of people coming aboard to help us with the right ways of telling the story without selling the image or going over any type of special requirements that their tribal affiliation requires. Sometimes they're very private in terms of when it comes to ceremonial and ritual or storytelling. So we make sure that we don't step our boundaries with that.
So you bring in consultants, like artistic consultants, to kind of help you out to make sure that you're moving in the correct direction with the traditional work.
Correct. And just recently, our board of directors made it a requirement that we have an elder on the board of directors, as well as bringing on a youth director on the board, because we want to also make sure that we take into consideration that we're kind of in the middle space when it comes to representing our elders and the new generation coming up. We all have different points of views, and we're growing up in different situations and different times. So we want to make sure that everyone's voice is heard on the table before we go through our programming for the year.
Wow. I'm kind of curious. I definitely want to talk about the work that you guys are doing, the Native work that you're doing, for sure. I'm just very curious, how do you tell a Shakespeare story or one of those classics through your lens? Like I'm curious how that.
Well,
do that.
Actually, one of the first plays that Two Worlds was able to produce was by James Lujan, the founder called Kino and Chorizo, which was an adaptation of Romeo and Juliet. And it was a story adapted from a Spanish perspective and a Native American Pueblo perspective, where these two cross lovers fell in love from different cultures in a time where everything was transitioning with the Spanish coming in to take over. So it was really well represented. A lot since then, I think that was my first experience really seeing some of the classical works transition into a Native lens. And it was really exciting for me because I love to do Shakespeare, and I haven't given enough opportunities to do so because I am a colored actress. So there was excitement from that, I think, from the community to see more of that. And now we have some really good practitioners in our nation, artistic directors, who are all Native and from Indigenous descent, who are now writing shows along those lines. I've seen a lot of adaptations starting to go on stage. People are starting to take interest in it. And then in the past 2 years, we've been actually sort of adapting into musical theater as well. So it's really exciting. I am not a writer. The writers are doing their work, and I'm really proud of them for doing it because we need more of this.
Very cool. Thank you for answering that.
Especially for Dave, because he's a huge Shakespeare dude. So
I
get that right out of the way.
He's right there. He's watching us. He's right there.
Yeah, just right there.
He is always watching. And he's on my mug too. So yeah.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah, see, case in point. There we go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't even want to show you my bookshelf right now because you'll just think I'm a nut. So.
Yeah.
Cool. So.
Yeah, I'm waiting for someone to write on Macbeth and transition that into a Native form, because one of my top leading roles has always been wanting to play Lady Macbeth. So I'm just waiting.
It's one of my top roles I want to play. Who doesn't want to play Lady Macbeth?
Of course, like the dream role.
Yes, for I think everybody. There should be everyone's dream role. Can you commission something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure that it's, I actually have been in the conference for the theater communications group this week. There has been a lot of great talk on some of the development of what we're going to be coming out of from COVID-19. So, and then also the whole talk of intimacy and touching and having to integrate the mask and the social distancing within our shows. It's really important for us to understand as artistic directors where we're going to be going next, and what that happens for us, for the Native community, is that changes everything. So and goes right back to I don't know, we'll have to see what comes out of it.
Yeah, it's a very uncertain time, right? I mean, the one thing we've been seeing with no matter who we talk to, we're all kind of in the same spot right now with this when it comes to theater, and where do we go from here, and how to get used to all this new stuff, and the new rules, I guess, right? So.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So.
How have you guys been adapting? Have you been adapting? Have you tried to transition to virtual theater? I mean, everyone's attempting something, I assume. So what have you been doing?
Well, we're very optimistic about the future. I think from learning from this past week of the conference, some of the things that I've taken into my own development of how we are going to do our programming is how we're going to create seeds of intimacy. Because in our shows, we have a lot of work. We come from a traumatic history of, genocide and pretty much genocide, and we've had our own battles with viruses and illnesses from very long ago. So we're just trying to find ourselves. I think before COVID-19 hit, we were starting to engage in more intimacy at the physical theater. I was making sure that I let my actors know that we needed to push the limits when it came to physical theater, because we needed to make sure that we're just not doing everything from a perspective where we're not including the fourth wall. that was some of the first steps that we started to transition these past 2 years, is integrating the audience more. So we were all excited about that, and we have been moving forward with our training in terms of that. But now with COVID-19, we have to kind of shift back to how storytelling takes place in our realm. And I think really we're probably going to have to, the next step is maybe hiring someone that has more training in intimacy, coordination, or choreography, and helping us integrate some of our storytelling when it comes to communication. Because I am a director. I know how to direct my actors. I say, okay, this is the blocking, and now we're going to move forward with, you know, creating the space and developing it into your form, or developing it with the actor, with their help, of course. Yeah. But now it changes my perspective as a director. So one of the first things I really want to do is jump on the boat with hiring an intimacy coordinator that could help me transition the way I direct my actors and my staff. Because the most important thing, I think, for all of us is to protect our actors and to protect our staff members. Yeah. And we want to make sure that, especially now with this whole week going by, the whole language of race comes up again, and we're very well. We have that experience with that in our own way. So we want to make sure that we take some time to really define what inclusion and diversity is to us now, and how we could help us also, because we take into account our own trauma, but we want to make sure that we're there for the African American and the community, for them, because they are our relatives and our sisters and brothers. We want to make sure that we take this time and space for them to let them know that we have a door open for you as well.
Excellent. That's awesome. So I think it's a perfect way to like shift into the work that you do. You know, I'm really curious what's at the heart of the company, and like what, you know, if you had to pick a show or two since you've been there to say, this is what we stand for, this is the identity of our company, what would that be, and why? And then you can literally branch off and talk about any kind of work that you guys have done, because we're just very curious to hear about your unique perspective.
One second, guys. One second. I'm sorry. I just got this dog keeps bothering me. I'm sorry.
What, you have a dog in there with you?
He just wants to be around me all the time.
I'm not going to edit this out, Mike. This is staying in.
I'm so sorry. You hear barking, you're going to think it's me, so I'm sorry. Okay, my apologies.
No worries. I think when we first started out, and I'm sorry to go back to the first time that I stepped on stage with Two Worlds, I think one of the first experiences with our work was just kind of taking into account the show that we were doing. A lot of it had to do with boarding schools, and we have some history with boarding schools taking away a lot of Native American kids at a young age, or there's a lot of trauma behind that. So a lot of early work was about youth being taken away and put into a non-Native home, and there they were obviously mistreated, and they were traumatized. And what came out of that story, the first one that I did, was very traumatic, and I'm starting with a few shows that we started off from the very beginning, and it definitely was a hard, I guess I was either playing a role where you were playing a stereotypical Pocahontas and Sacagawea character because you're a Native actress, or you're playing a Native actress who was abused and raped and stolen from your Native family. So it was always one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
There was never really, it was hard because at the beginning of my acting career, that's pretty much the roles that were happening. And it's okay. It's okay to talk about those things, and it's okay to produce those shows. And there was there needed to be said. But I think in the middle of our experience with the company, we started to shift from this trauma and drama of storytelling, and then we started shifting into a comedic form, mm-hmm. where we were like, okay, let's tell our own jokes. Even if people that are non-native don't get it, we're just going to start going into comedy and start telling our own jokes. And I think that's kind of when people started to say, hey, Native theater exists again, because really our golden age of Native theater really happened between the years of 1985 and 1995, which was called the golden age of Native theater. And so a lot of playwrights at that point were emerging and producing work nationally, mainly in Canada, of course, and I've started to kind of push down into the North American continent. So
let me just interrupt for just a sec. Why was that considered the golden age? What was going on that made that an important time?
And this, along these years, were a lot of developments of Native theater companies. So a lot of them were like Native Earth Performing Arts from Canada, and they all started, they were all, that's one of the Native theater companies that were founded. I think there's Red Sky Performance came out of that in Toronto, and so a lot of the performing artists started to develop their own companies. So this was technically the golden age where people started to form an actual organization.
Okay. Was there a lot of representation for Native theater before that?
Well, one of the first practitioners of Native theater was a Mohawk poet named Emily Pauline Johnson. And she performed dramatic readings of her poems in the late 19th century. That's probably one of the first real performances that was given to the community. But when we talk about Native, rituals and ceremonies and storytelling, it's been from the very beginning.
Okay. So your first experiences. Oh, I'm sorry. No, go ahead.
Yes,
You're not done.
I'm sorry.
No, keep going.
Going back to the mid, the transition of Two Worlds, we started from actual storytelling of like full-length plays, talking a lot about, the trauma of Native Americans. And then we started going into a different phase where we started talking about the comedy and the humor behind our culture. And a lot of the writers were starting to get interested in writing funny scripts about, for instance, one that just pops up to mind is called The Firebread Queen. And just having a sense of humor at, having a good time on stage and letting our actors know that we can do comedy as well. Mm-hmm. I think, and then the last part of it, and just most recently where we are now is transitioning, and where we have been, this is all before COVID-19, mm-hmm. of course, was really having a voice for what's happening in the movement of Native American and Indigenous people. And I think that we've always had that spirit of wanting to, break down the doors and wanting to tell our stories. But I think, I feel from my perspective, when we started having the Standing Rock protests happen in the Dakotas, we started to really pay attention to how the uprising of this movement was changing our lens of storytelling again. And I think anytime any movements like that happen, especially now with things that are happening right now as George Floyd, I'm sorry if I'm not thinking straight, what's happening now with the African American community, I think we're shifting our lens again.
Mm-hmm.
So I think before COVID-19, Two Worlds' main focus was telling the stories of the missing and murdered Indigenous women, which is called the MMIW movement. And that's one of the most important works that we've been, the productions that we've been developing since 2018. I started the work with another organization here in Albuquerque called the Storytellers of New Mexico. I was approached by them and they said they wanted to work with us in developing a new script for women of color. And so I said, yes, let's do it. And we held an audition and got the right people together. And we eventually came down to Indigenous and Native women. 4 of us, including myself, were telling the stories of, modern women and that happen to be Native and Indigenous women, and wrapping that around our matriarchal figures. So we sat down and we wrote the story together. We shared some of our own personal experiences, and it was basically we were bridging together our storytelling together, and it came out to a beautiful script, which is now called Spider Woman Story. And it talks a lot about the Native movement of the MMIW, domestic violence among Native women, and alcohol and drug substance abuse. It talks about real world things from our lens and our perspectives, and it definitely was something that once the community saw it, they were just thrown away about how honest and genuine we could be with this subject, because it's so hard to talk about. But it was even more of a push for the community to see when you see it live on stage. And it's hard. We do have one character who is called Warrior Woman, who is an aspiring actress who gets murdered at the end and goes to the next world and realizes that she's been killed, and wakes up in the next world, and these matriarchal figures, all the women, all the actresses transition into matriarchal figures at the end, and they realize, that this is a hard thing. I originally played the role, but we gave the new role to someone else because it was something that was hard to put on stage. And actually, from this recent theater conference that I'm in, we've been discovering what it means to be a director of intimacy and what it takes. And so I've been learning on my end that I need to make sure that I provide and hold space for actors who have to go into a traumatic moment and then come out of it and then have to do it again the next night and then the next night. I've always, I guess it's because I come from a military background, I've been able to get on stage and do it and come off and then get ready for the next scene. But I never really took in consideration how that might affect someone. And so I think my first real open discussion about all of this was from an audience member who came to see our show and said how hard it was for her to sit there and watch it. And I remember being in that seat long ago, seeing something that was traumatizing to me, and I didn't know how to react. I was just kind of stunned, and I walked out of the theater just completely like, oh my God, like I need to shake it off. So I'm starting to shift my perspectives on how we deliver our work so that we can take into consideration of people's space. I want to make sure that everyone that comes to see our shows, including my staff and my actors, are safe.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
So that's where we are now.
that brings us up to the modern, to current time.
Yes. COVID-19 has obviously, we have a lot of storytelling to talk about. So my writers are always coming up with these really beautiful stories of how to tell their stories traditionally, but also in a new form, in a new way of expressing yourself. I think Two Worlds is slowly shifting into a multimedia where we do a little bit of film, we do a little bit of choreography, we do a little bit of movement, we do a little bit of physical theater. We do a little bit of everything, and somehow our performances have sort of all fit into one full like show where people just take it away and you're like, wow, I remember this scene and I remember that scene, I remember that song that you did. And it kind of all just kind of fits for us as Native Americans, because we, in ceremonial ways, we include not only our prayers, but we include our song and our dance as well.
Is that as a result of COVID-19 because you're trying to find other ways to branch out, or was that a natural progression that was happening beforehand?
It was happening beforehand. And now that we're not in face-to-face with anybody, we're making sure that we give the same type of performance virtually now. Actually, we have a virtual performance coming up on June 18th, and we're trying to develop a way of giving our story through the lens of Zoom or through the lens of YouTube.
Yeah, here it is. So June 18th. So what is this performance? And I definitely want you to plug it for the 3 people who are going to watch this.
So June 18th, I decided to bring our past and present actors together to speak a little bit about what's going on in the world. We have a little bit of comedy performance that are coming. There's this new movement of Native comedy artists that are coming out, especially from New Mexico. And every time I see them, I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to bring you on to stage for something, because it's important that your voice is heard. And they're funny. They're just so they're full of humor, and they're full of life and energy. And I think that's what our community needs right now. So I'm bringing them back to the stage, or not to the stage, but virtually, to share their messages of hope through laughter, because we believe laughter is medicine. Absolutely. And we did actually have a really good performance that was supposed to happen in March, along with Tricklock Theater Company here in Albuquerque, and they have a really important festival called the Revolution Theater Festival, and we were going to be featured along with a lot of international artists here in Albuquerque, and unfortunately, due to COVID-19, they had to postpone that. So that's where Spider Woman Stories was going to perform. So we're going to make sure that we do a little bit of a sneak peek to that performance on a virtual platform. And the other artists that I have coming aboard are actually well-known Native poets and activists who want to share a message of hope to our Native theater community and supporters that have followed us for so long.
That was sorry, Quinn.
No, I just want to find out where it was. That's all.
Oh yeah, where? Yeah.
Where can we watch this?
Yes. So we're trying to figure out, because we've never done this before. We're making sure that we invite our audience to get a reserved place or seating through Eventbrite. Okay. And the title of the show is called Sage Yourself, and hosted by Two Worlds. And,
Sage Yourself, like SAGE. You say?
Yeah, like sage, like the sage.
Got it.
Sage yourself, like save yourself, but sage yourself.
Nice.
Because whenever we have negativity or things that are happening in the world, we always make sure that we bless ourselves with the smoke, at least for our culture, or at least for the Navajo culture. And so, yeah, there's going to be an hour and a half, but it seems like since I've announced bringing some artists together, more and more artists are like, oh, I want to be a part of it. I want to do something. So I'm like, okay, well, this is great, because we're all just waiting for a time and a date to have that happen. And I'm glad that Two Worlds can be the place to feature that.
That's excellent. So it's a coming together of lots of different Native artists, not just from your company, but from outside also. Yes,
because we feel in our mission, of course, for Two Worlds is basically to be sort of an incubator for growing and inspiring Native artists. Obviously, Two Worlds will produce their own shows, but we want to make sure that that any artist that works with us has a place to educate themselves and a place to discover their artistic way of performing and develop their own work in their own theater companies. So we're promoting other artists to make more Native theater companies and more Native theater organizations, because we need more. Two Worlds shouldn't be the only one here in Albuquerque, especially New Mexico.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you are the only one.
Right now we are. So, that there's a lot of comedy troupes that are coming out. So we're supporting that as well. We want to make sure that they always know that Two Worlds is up there cheering them on.
Right.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I know, like you touched on laughter being, medicine. I totally agree completely from what, my own experience. I love that's needed now, because I feel like some people are kind of, at least from some of the people I've been talking to, are kind of afraid. But I feel our philosophy is candles work best in the dark, and so I'm glad to see you guys are lighting that candle and bringing some light to some difficult times, because some people are kind of timid about it, which is, I understand the valid feelings behind that, but I commend you guys for continuing that.
Yeah, and I have always felt like comedy and drama go into one, or excuse me, drama and comedy. Yeah, did I say that right? Yeah. I think that it's just really, it transitions and transforms into one another. And for us, it's making fun of ourselves sometimes and laughing about it. And even if it's a bad situation, we're like, oh, okay, this is what happened, but guess where I'm at now? And like just having a good sense of humor to grow from that, because we don't want people to feel sorry for us anymore. And I think that's what our relatives are feeling right now. They don't want the movement of Black Lives Matter to go too far in a way that would they would feel like they're being belittled, because we know how that feels.
Mm-hmm. So do you mind just talking a little bit about like the history of Native theater, the traditional theater that influences, what you guys do now?
Well, obviously, the history of not being given a place for storytelling has always been a problem for us. We all actually have a long history of silence, discrimination, oppression, and displacement from the society that we know. And so now that we actually have been voicing our, and this takes time, this takes time. We wanted to make sure that we were coming in that we were ready to represent Native theater, because it puts a lot on our shoulders, because we don't want to step on anybody's foot when it comes to representation. But also, I think that I've been understanding now as a leader that I have to take into account talking to representatives that are non-Native who can help us get to the place where we need to be. So it's good to be in a place where I can work with the city of Albuquerque. They actually have really recognized the fact that we're the Native theater in Albuquerque, and they've been making sure that they take time to bring us up on a higher level with everybody else. And it's been really, really supportive. I am so happy to see our political leaders taking a stand in the world. Deborah Holland, our congresswoman who's representing us in Washington right now, is a huge stand in who and where we're going, who we are and where we're going. And I think the possibilities of our performance and our programming is just going to get bigger and bigger. And that's why I'm advocating now to the city of Albuquerque and the state of New Mexico how important it is that we have a home to call, a place to call home. So I'm hoping that the representatives will make sure that we need a space for Native American performing in Native American Performing Arts Center here in Albuquerque, because there isn't one, and there should be, because there isn't.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's a certain way we deliver ourselves and the way we portray ourselves to the community. We want to make sure that we're not only, working with political people to get us to the place where we are, but we want to make sure that we represent our history and our ancestral roots, and let people know that, you are standing on Native American land. You are standing on our land. Wherever you are in the nation, this is our land. So, and slowly and surely, these things are opening, the doors are opening finally for Two Worlds. It's taken me so long hours of just trying to understand where I need to go with this organization. And I'm just glad to have our political leaders support us on that. So I'm not sure if I answered your question, but.
It's probably a better answer than
it's a better answer than
our answer to my question.
But
So
the oral literature that comes from our work, our oral culture and our literature is we're trying to find a happy medium with the traditional Western concept of theater. So that's always a discovery, depending on the script that you have.
That's a very cool description of what you do. I think trying to, and that's your constant mission, isn't it? To try to
push
find
the boundaries.
Yeah.
Yes, and sometimes, as you guys know, you guys are artists. Sometimes you'll offend someone, and sometimes you'll do something.
Yeah, just ask Mike about that. Yeah.
and that's okay. I mean, if we weren't doing something like that, we're not doing our job as artists.
Right.
Yep.
Exactly.
I mean, really, you just said my thoughts, so I don't even know what to say. That's exactly how I feel. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I don't condone myself as the all-seeing eye or knowing how to do Native theater, because I think we're all learning together. I always make sure to work with other artistic directors nationally. One that I am particularly fond of is in Minneapolis. One is called New Native Theater, and that's run by Rihanna Yazzie, who's the artistic director there. This wonderful lady who I've known for a while now just is the sister to Native theater for Two Worlds. She is such an amazing inspiration to our community, along with so many others. There are so many great theater companies here nationally that I'm being introduced to, and they're always making sure that Two Worlds is on the table because we represent the Southwest.
Is there representation of Native theater all over the country? Like, are there certain pockets where there isn't any?
Yeah. We actually are in, there's theater companies in LA, there's a theater company in Minneapolis, in New York, Canada, one here. And I know that the whole mission is to kind of just push it to the boundaries of everywhere. I know that there's upcoming grassroots organizations that are springing up in different parts of the state. Not this state, but other states. And it's really good to hear that we are all now coming together and pushing the form of, our traditional storytelling. We know each other. We see each other all the time at the same conferences. And so it's good to hear what everyone else is working on, and we support that. And we're like, yes, this show is going to be touring, and this person's going to be involved. And what show are you doing this year? Because this show is the show that we're doing. So we're very supportive of each other, of each other's work.
It's kind of like what we say with our friends: if one of us succeeds, we all succeed.
Exactly. Yeah. And we all have the same, we all have the same struggles of the challenging stereotypes in the entertainment industry. So we hear that, especially with the film industry now being here prominently in New Mexico. There's studios just popping up right and left. So with that, we want to make sure that they understand that, hey, there's Native actors here who are doing some really good work, and you should make sure that you appreciate that and not just come in and use all of our resources and take off, because they are doing some good work here, but we don't want the wrong stereotypical, the same stereotypical movies that show a bad representation of our people. And we hope that they start to change that in Hollywood.
Are you optimistic about that? Do you think it will happen?
Well, I am optimistic about New Mexico because we pay attention to that. And I think the industry here, the film industry, the Albuquerque film organizations and the New Mexico film organizations here, they're really paying attention to the appropriate representation of our people. So anytime we have films that come in here, they always have someone that is a mentor or someone who could be an advocate for that tribe or affiliation. And that is good to hear, because I don't know how often that happens in Hollywood because I don't live there, but there needs to be that person to look over the work that the writer is doing.
Agreed. I know you mentioned before you're the only Native theater troupe in Albuquerque, right? Or is it all of New Mexico? No, it's not all of New Mexico, no.
I believe that we're the only 501c organization in New Mexico that represent all of Native theater and performing arts. But there are grassroots comedy troupes that are coming up from different parts of the state that are still coming into, they're growing and they're developing. So we want to make sure that we support that, because we want them to grow and to prosper.
Right. So as a leader in that field, as a leader in Native theater, are you, or is your organization reaching out to these film studios to try to bridge that gap between, what they're doing and what you're doing, and kind of bring you guys together?
Yes. Actually, I am very involved. I happen to we had some transition with the film industry here in Albuquerque. They switched from one person to a new leader whom I don't not associate with, but we have reached out to the Albuquerque Film Commission before and spoke to them about who we were and where we'd like to go with film, because we do a little bit of short films here and there and PSA work occasionally, depending on the project. So we want to make sure that they have a place to come if they have questions or concerns, or even if they're looking for Native American talent. We do have talent agencies here in Albuquerque, but I still get phone calls from LA, and I still get phone calls from New York asking me if I know of a Native actor who can perform this one film. So it's actually, I keep having to tell them, I'm not a talent agency, I'm an organization. But it's great to know that they can come to us to find the right talent.
That's great. Got any questions, Mike? I think I have one more.
You go first, and then I have my kind of wrap-up question.
Perfect. Okay.
Thank you again. This has been really wonderful.
Yeah,
Thank you.
It's such a learning experience.
Yes, and I of course, I just want to advocate that there's so many wonderful, great artistic directors who have been in the field even longer than I have. And I'm sure that they would give you a full body 300-page paper on Native theater, because I look up to them, and I'm sure that they're always there for me when I have questions. So I'm new at being a leader, but I'm happy to be one.
Excellent. And that's it's great to know that there are other people like yourself, or even more experienced than yourself, who are doing this. Because I can tell you right now, when Mike introduced, he said, oh, here's this person I was researching. I'll admit, I knew nothing about Native American theater, nothing. I actually had to go into my theater history books and start reading up. And what I found, and I told Mike this immediately, in a 500 or 600 page book, there are 2 pages on a Native theater. And that encompassed everything from Canada down through Central America. And that's when I kind of knew that this is going to be an interesting talk.
You know, I'm glad you brought that up, because we are trying to change that lens along with institutions here that teach drama, because we have to have a place where Native American drama is studied, because it is a different, there needs to be a place for it. So I'm hoping that institutions will start to open up doors along those lines, because now there's a lot more Native American actors and directors who are really trying to make it a profession, and I'm really happy to hear that. As well, you know, there's already institutions here that are not university related, but there's places in Santa Fe that have their own Native American drama arts program that have just started recently, maybe 3 or 2 years ago. And it's just exciting to hear that there's so many people who want to know and learn more about it. It actually, you know, it even goes back to the whole concept in our own history books in high school, like why wasn't there enough history or the real history behind Native Americans? Because they don't talk about the genocide. They don't talk about how we've been wiped out time and time again, but we keep rising up and coming back. So, you know, and at this time, I'm sure that the Navajo Nation we're going through such a huge pandemic right now with the COVID-19 that's hitting our nation. And so it's hard to see that. And I hope that they don't leave that out in history books. I wouldn't want my children to not see what really has happened to our people. And I think that's why we have to have drama and storytelling. So I'm advocating for institutions to move that direction.
As you should, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, this is the question we kind of been asking. The last question to a few others is, how has this affected you? I mean, this is my way of finding my purpose. You know, when sometimes you get lost and you're like, especially in these days, this is something that I still hold on to. How has this maybe affected you and driven you?
With COVID-19 or the recent?
Just this journey you've been on for the last couple of years of being a leader and
your theater journey.
Yeah, your theater journey.
You know, why is theater the art form that you have been drawn to, and why do you still do it? What got you there? What makes it your chosen form of self-expression?
Wow.
Just from the heart, Kim. Just from the heart.
I believe I started out as a musician. I actually played the cello all the way from middle school, high school, and then I thought that being a cellist was going to be my main profession. I've always been involved with the arts from a very young age. I think when I started theater back in high school is when I really started to open up my self-expression. I've always kind of been kind of closed and shy, the little shy Native girl in the back of the classroom, just like, no, I don't want to talk. But it was a chance for me to open up and to discover myself, whether or not I continued just being cast as just one stereotype, which kind of was hard for me to deal with in the beginning. But more and more the doors were starting to open, and here we are in 2020. With everything that's going on, it reassures me how important the arts are. I can't express enough how important we need to tell our stories, especially during this time where so many things are happening in the world, where it's hard to see, to turn on the TV. And I've always felt that the arts has been my home and place of discovery. I don't know. I guess, I mean, I have always felt very connected to being on stage and to having my feet touch. There's something magical that happens to me when my feet touch a stage, any stage, as soon as I go on or am helping another actor or doing something. But there's something magical that happens when you're performing, And it's just a chance for you to open your heart and be the storyteller. And I never found another way to express myself in any form or fashion. I've tried writing it down, you know, journaling or something, or painting, but it's always performing that brings me back to where I'm at. And supporting the arts, now taking myself out off the stage and seeing how important it is to everybody else. It's so important to support the arts. I know that I didn't have anyone to look up to, and so now I'm hoping to be that person for the next little Native girl who is trying to find a place to express themselves, and I'm hoping to be that person for them. So
thank you so very much.
Thank you.
It's been such a great conversation. I hope you feel the same way. It's been really wonderful for both of us. So thank you.
Oh, we sincerely appreciate, you know, your honesty, your story, the education that you gave both of us right now, and we're eternally thankful. So thank you very much for the time.
Thank you so much.